The barn stood tall and sturdy at the edge of the property, its wide wooden doors opening to reveal the tools, equipment, and feed that kept daily life running smoothly. For the homeowner, this wasn't just a barn. It was the heartbeat of the land, a place where mornings began with the rumble of a tractor engine and evenings ended with the steady rhythm of animals settling in for the night. Life on the property was peaceful, steady, and full of purpose, a rhythm built on hard work and the satisfaction of seeing fields tended and animals cared for. Yet even in this quiet corner of the community, the HOA loomed in the background, their constant notices and watchful eyes always searching for something to critique. Among them, Karen stood out, the kind of neighbor who treated HOA rules as weapons rather than guidelines, sending letters about things as small as a slightly crooked fence post or a tractor parked near the wrong spot on the gravel. The homeowner had learned to brush it off, focusing instead on the barn, the animals, and the land they loved. But the tension never fully disappeared. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen, and everyone had a story about her overreaching authority, her sense of entitlement, and her flair for making the smallest issues into the biggest problems. Still, the barn doors had always opened without trouble, the tractor had always had room to move, and life carried on as it should, until the day Karen decided to make her boldest move yet. It began on an ordinary morning when the homeowner rolled out of bed ready to tackle chores, only to step outside and stop cold at the sight in front of the barn. Parked deliberately across both wooden doors was a brand-new Bentley, its polished black paint gleaming in the sun, blocking every inch of access. The homeowner stood stunned for a moment, gripping their coffee mug as disbelief turned slowly into frustration. The barn wasn't just storage, it was essential. Tools, feed, and the tractor were all locked behind those doors, and every task of the day depended on access. Neighbors soon began to notice the car, too, whispering and pointing as they passed. It didn't take long before Karen appeared, sunglasses perched on her face, strutting across the driveway with the smug satisfaction of someone who thought she was untouchable. She made no move to explain, no move to apologize, only tossed a casual glance at the homeowner before remarking that her car looked perfect right there and that perhaps they should consider finding a better place for. The homeowner set down the coffee mug, took a steady breath, and walked toward Karen, determined to keep the situation calm. With a polite tone, they explained that the barn doors needed to be opened immediately, that feed deliveries had to be moved, and that chores couldn't wait while her Bentley sat in the way. Karen didn't flinch. She adjusted her sunglasses, leaned casually against the car, and smirked as though the request was nothing more than background noise. Instead of apologizing or offering to move, she deflected with a sharp remark about how community standards didn't include tractors parked in sight, and that perhaps this inconvenience was a lesson in keeping the property more presentable. The homeowner tried again, still measured, pointing out that the barn was a working structure, not a decoration, and that time-sensitive tasks couldn't be ignored. But Karen escalated further, folding her arms and declaring that as a member of the HOA board, she had every right to enforce what she believed was best for the neighborhood, even if that meant leaving her Bentley parked across the barn. Minutes ticked by, each one making chores more urgent, livestock more restless, and the homeowner more aware that reason wasn't going to break through Karen's wall of arrogance. Neighbors lingered at a distance, whispering and watching, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others pulling out phones to capture the unfolding standoff. The polite approach had failed, and the pressure of blocked responsibilities made it clear that patience wouldn't solve this battle. The standoff dragged on, and what began as an inconvenience quickly grew into a full-blown spectacle. Karen leaned against her Bentley as though she were on display, snapping photos of the barn and the driveway, muttering that she would be filing another formal complaint with the HOA. Every word dripped with arrogance. Every gesture meant to show she held power here. The homeowner clenched their jaw, the weight of wasted minutes pressing harder with each tick of the clock. Inside the barn, animals stirred restlessly, their feeding delayed, and tools that were needed for repairs sat locked away behind the blocked doors. Neighbors began to gather in small clusters across the street, whispering about how far Karen had gone this time. some even shaking their heads with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The homeowner tried one last time, firm but controlled, warning her that she was creating more than an inconvenience, that she was disrupting essential work. Karen only laughed, tossing her keys in the air and catching them with a smug grin, daring him to challenge her authority. It became clear in that moment that she wasn't going to back down, not out of reason, not out of courtesy, and certainly not out of respect. The homeowner stood still, silent for a long beat, before finally turning away. Neighbors watched as Karen smirked, thinking she had won the battle, but the truth was very different. While she believed her car was untouchable, the homeowner already knew exactly how this was going to end, and the solution was sitting quietly inside the very barn she had tried so hard to block. The homeowner walked back toward the porch without another word, the crowd of neighbors buzzing with questions, their voices low as they speculated about what would happen next. Karen's smirk widened, convinced her display of power had worked, that her Bentley sitting like a trophy in front of the barn doors had sent the message she wanted. But behind the calm expression on the homeowner's face was a plan forming with absolute clarity. The barn doors might have been blocked, but there was another way in, a smaller side entrance built for convenience, and behind it sat the machine that had carried them through every harvest, every repair, every storm. The tractor was more than just equipment. It was strength, reliability, and the one tool powerful enough to end this standoff on their terms. The homeowner slipped inside, the familiar scent of hay and diesel wrapping around them, the sight of the tractor's massive frame casting long shadows across the barn floor. Hands gripped the wheel with calm determination as the engine roared to life, its deep growl rolling through the air like a warning. Outside, Karen's smugness faltered for the first time, the sound turning her confident grin into a flicker of unease as neighbors gasped and leaned forward, eyes wide with anticipation. This wasn't a plea. This wasn't another round of negotiation. This was the moment when the homeowner would reclaim their ground, not with words, but with action, and nothing Karen could say would stop what was already in motion. The ground trembled as the tractor rolled forward, its massive tires crunching against gravel, the engine's steady roar silencing the whispers of the crowd. The barn doors rattled as they opened just enough for the machine to push through, sunlight glinting off its steel frame as it emerged into the open yard. Karen froze, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, sunglasses slipping down the bridge of her nose as her smirk faltered into disbelief. She shouted something about rules and fines, but her voice cracked under the weight of the tractor's growl. The homeowner didn't raise their voice, didn't make a scene. They simply steered with calm precision, inching closer until the shadow of the machine loomed directly over the polished Bentley. The neighbors held their breath as the front loader lowered, metal meeting metal in a clash that sent a gasp rippling through the crowd. The tractor pressed forward, controlled yet unstoppable, the Bentley's sleek body crumpling under its sheer weight, glass shattering, paint grinding against steel as Karen's prized car transformed from a symbol of arrogance into twisted wreckage. Karen screamed in disbelief, hands flailing as she backed away, but there was no undoing what had already been done. When the tractor finally came to a stop, the once pristine Bentley was nothing more than a mangled shell, blocking no one's path anymore. The homeowner cut the engine. The silence that followed, filled with the stunned gasps and muffled laughter of neighbors who had just witnessed justice carried out in the most unforgettable way. Calmly, without a single word, the homeowner stepped down, brushed dust off their hands, and looked at the barn doors now free and clear. The message had been delivered. Boundaries were not suggestions, and respect could not be demanded through intimidation. The crowd slowly dispersed, neighbors shaking their heads in disbelief. Some still chuckling under their breath, others quietly applauding the courage it took to stand up against Karen's endless arrogance. The homeowner stood tall beside the barn, not triumphant in boastful victory, but calm, collected, and at peace with the choice they had made. The barn doors were clear, the animals fed, and the land once again running on the steady rhythm it always had. Karen, red-faced and flustered, stormed off down the driveway, her shouts fading as she disappeared into the distance. her shattered Bentley left behind as the only reminder of her attempt to control what was never hers. In the days that followed, whispers around the community turned into open conversations, neighbors sharing how they had felt powerless under her constant watch, and how this act had reminded them that fairness wasn't about fear, it was about balance. The homeowner reflected on the moment not as an act of revenge, but as a boundary finally drawn in stone. Sometimes politeness failed, sometimes reason fell flat, but strength paired with resolve could speak louder than any threat. The barn stood exactly where it had always stood, the tractor parked quietly back inside, and the land carried on. But from that day forward, everyone knew one truth. Respect is earned, not demanded, and no car, no title, and no inflated sense of power could ever block the doorway to someone's hard-earned peace.